Good evening, everybody. This is Lindy. And as I told you before, I've been telling my life story. If you want to know the first few chapters up until the 80s, and I was born in 1947, then you'll need to see my other videos on storytelling. So tonight, I'm going to begin where I left off. I left Houston. I moved to San Francisco. I got a job as an accountant or bookkeeping for a small company that sold Xeroxes and installed copy machines and serviced them. I had always worked for kind of small companies. There was no way to move up or make more money, and I needed to make more money. So I decided one day I started just looking in the newspapers. And again, this is in the early 80s, and they put ads for jobs in the newspapers. And you would call up and set an appointment. You'd go into the human resource department. You would be interviewed. You'd hand over your resume. And then the next call you should get should be from the manager of that department, or the person you were going to work for would interview you. Totally different world nowadays. But then that's what happened. So I saw this job, and I will name the company because simply they no longer exist. But in the 80s, they were a pretty nice sized company. And it's called World Savings and Loan. And there was an ad for a secretary for the controller. And I applied for it. I went in and got the job. I really liked the controller. He really liked me. I took dictation, and I also typed, as well as I had an accounting background. Now, mind you, I never went to college. I did get a certificate in either accounting or bookkeeping, where you got that through the mail, you took all the tests, you studied, like it is the internet, but then it was through the mail. So I got that, and so I had a nice fit for being his secretary. Well, about 6 months in, I noticed they were having severe problems. Now, the owners of World Savings and Loan were a married couple, Mr. and Mrs. Sandler. They had bought World Savings and Loan, I believe, if my memory is correct, 3 branches in 1954 or 55. When I went to work for them, they now had 89 branches. So the first 6 months, I noticed there were severe problems in one department. And I started, it was one of the larger, if not the largest department in accounting. But big problems. And I'll tell you about them in just a minute. So what I did was I decided to go to lunch with all the clerks that worked in that department. Remember, I'm low level. And they started telling me of their problems and why no one would pay attention to what they were saying or doing. So I just sat back and I watched as they went through supervisor and manager and VP. And the first year I was there, and I was only there as his secretary about a year, I believe they went through 3 supervisors and 2 managers. Mr. and Mrs. Sandler were not happy. They were not happy campers. They were very upset with this department. So I went to my boss, and I had taken notes, and I had a plan. I had a plan to straighten this department out, and I knew I could do it. So I went to the controller, and I presented my plan, and I presented a timeline of when I would have this department back to where it should be. And my controller said, well, we can't do any worse, Lindy, and you want to do it? Sounds like a good plan. I'm going to make you supervisor. So I moved over to this department, which was the accounts payable department. At the time I moved over there, they were 2 and 3 months behind in paying their bills. They were paying late fees. They were not taking any discounts. Then if you're large enough and your bill's large enough, if you pay it early or on time, they give you a discount. It might be 5%, it might be 10%. So that was big bucks then, you know. And I mean, they were paying around manually typing approximately 6,000 checks a month. That's a lot of checks. And I believe at the time there were 14 clerks and two lead clerks. So I went in and I sat at every single desk. I did every job at every desk. And when I was done with that desk, I would write a procedure for them to follow and I'd put it in place. And then I'd go to the next desk. So I hit every single desk in my first 6 months. By the end of that 6 months, we were taking discounts, all discounts, and paying our bills on time. And trust me, management just couldn't believe it. I had no accounting degree. To me, it was just simple, logical sense. I knew what their problems were. Nobody ever talked to the clerks. Nobody ever asked them, what's the problem? Why are you confused? What's going on? Nobody ever sat at the desk and said, oh, do this, this, and this. And I singled out things. So only one person would pay all the electrical bills, or one person would pay just utility bills. One person would pay expense reports. So I put procedures in on how they would handle that. And again, management was very happy. And I went from there to within 2 years becoming manager of the whole department. And by then, I had a total of 19 employees. And were the Sandlers, they were so happy. Trust me. And about that time, we decided that we didn't have debit cards. You had to have a mainframe. Every bank's talking about it. The Sandlers did not want to do it, and they felt that the customers shouldn't have to pay to use a debit card just to get their own money. But they had to go along with what everybody else was doing. So they decided that they were going to put in a mainframe in a separate building altogether, and then they were going to take one department and they were going to ask the manager of that department if they would handle and be the go-between between the computer geeks and management. And guess whose department they asked? Mine. So at that point, I was going to college at night, and I changed classes from accounting to computer science, which is what we called it then, or computer programming. And I learned how to write programs in COBOL, which was the original language for the old-time mainframes. And it took us 2 years to put in that mainframe. So I was the go-between. And for 2 years I went to college. At night, 2 or 3 nights a week, accounting and computer programming. So that I would understand what that computer was asking, and I would understand how to present it to management. And I would present this to management, and I would get their questions and say, hey, what do you want to pull? What kind of information do you want out of this? And then you would have to look at the program, and you would have to write a program that would pull specific information. So during the 2 years that it took to get this all installed and running smoothly, I also sat with management and we wrote all the policies, company policies, for purchasing and accounts payable. And the Sandlers signed off on it. So at this point, we got it, and in 2 years it was running smoothly. And they had already acquired, I'd say, about 20 or 30 more branches. We were growing so fast. But it was a really hard time. I was going to school at night. I was working 5, 6, 7 days a week, depending on, maybe I spent all my days, 5 days a week, working with the computer geeks, and then the other 2s I'd have to catch up on my work, my actual work. So it was at a point where every check that went out had to have my initial. I had to review every check. And every week, a different VP would sign the checks manually, which means I would take baskets of checks into them, and they would not sign those checks unless my initials were on it. So I might be there late at night doing checks, and then the first thing in the morning, dropping them off on their desk. I would have to sit there and answer all their questions on any check that was in there. So I had to have reviewed them and initialed them and known what they were paying. And I think we're going to stop here. We've been going for about 10 minutes. This is only my first maybe 3 years with World. And it was a very special place for me. So this is going to take maybe 3 videos. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a great week. Please subscribe and give me a like. Camo. I'll see you next time.